I'm Dr. Jaime Module. Welcome to Module 1, Vision of Self, in the course, If You Want to Fly Higher, You Must Be Lighter. I think of victimhood, this first part of this course, as often mourning the past, where when people get in touch with their suffering, especially if it relates to sexual abuse, but other kinds of hardship, that we can really focus on what could have been, what should have been. And I call it the there and then kind of living, as opposed to the next stage, which might be here and then, mourning the present, which is different from being in the here and now, being more present to ourselves and to others, and being able to then create or co-create the lives that we wish to have. There are a lot of movies that ask the first question that drives part one, and this module, in fact, and that is, who are you? It's a profound question, not an easy one. And there are a lot of movies that talk about that. I mean, think of the Bourne movies, where the person doesn't know and has to figure out his past. And there was an odd movie called Memento, a person who blocked or had loss of memories and was trying to re-figure out, piece together his life, his identity. Certainly movies like, Harry Potter, Star Wars, where the main character, other people see that person as more than they think they are, and then in fact they become, because of their woundedness, because of their loss, they become heroic. Certainly the story of Jesus and Buddha, that developing sense of who we are. Are we just human beings, or are we spiritual beings having a human experience? So this is a critical, foundational question, and so we begin with that. Who we are, who we think we are. And, my tie is a Dali tie. It may give us the impression that we don't really know what we're looking at. And for ourselves, for victims of people who experience trauma and abuse, we have a lot of confusion often of who really we are, because we pay so much attention to what others have told us, or how we've been treated and what we've internalized. And so I want to start off by saying that there's more to us than meets the eye. We're more than we think we are. And we want to spend a little bit of time with focusing on getting to know ourselves at our core even better, so that then we can rebuild. We're all impacted by the ways that others treat us. I grew up in a violent alcoholic home. I was hungry a lot of the times. I wished I lived and could be in a different setting altogether. And there was some violence, and although my dad didn't hit me, he did mistreat others, he said things to me that really had a big impact. Just told me how stupid I was, and I wasn't then and I wasn't now. I mean, I went on to go to Stanford and get a master's and get a doctorate and so on, and there's no way that I'm stupid, but that drove me, that impacted me at a deep level. In fact, there are a lot of things that impact us that we don't really realize, we're not conscious of. And there's a way of thinking of the brain, how much we use, that maybe we use 3% of our brain. So let's just say roughly, if 1% of that is conscious, so we know what we know, 1% of that is we know what we don't know, and so we can take courses, we can read, we can find out more. And 1% being we don't know what we know. So we just automatically use all kinds of background experience and knowledge without even thinking of it, to drive a car, to multitask, and so on. But then there's this huge part of us that we don't know what we don't know. And a lot of that is unconscious. And so we are impacted and often driven by the unconscious, that decay. And so there's much more to us than meets the eye, even for ourselves. So I want to say that we're all developing, and this is a real important piece for any of us who feels hopeless and frustrated or furious about where we find ourselves, our physical, emotional, intellectual, or spiritual state. That we are developing in all those different areas. I mean, there's a story of a wise person who people would go to see, and whatever the question they went with, they would come back either like ecstatic or in tears. And so, this one king saw all these people going up and coming back, ecstatic, and went up and went to talk to this wise person, and the person shared these 4 words with them. The king presented all the things that he had going on in his kingdom. And the 4 words were, "This too shall pass." And so we are always in flux. We are always developing and changing. And so this program is about this integration of body, mind, spirit, and transformation. And when we're in suffering or in pain, it's often not easy to believe that there's something beyond what we're currently experiencing. And so this development at a physical level, at an emotional level, intellectual and spiritual level is true for individuals. It's also true for groups. And so we'll just talk about that briefly. Physically, well, there's lots of evidence to say that we are always evolving, developing, becoming more than we were just previously. From conception to birth, there's an incredible amount of development of cells that makes us who we are. In adolescence, there's another rush of development, only second to that initial gestation period. As adults, our cells are constantly being replaced. And so every few years, we have different cells. And there's something amazing that all the information doesn't get lost from one generation of cells to another, from one generation of organs to another. And so we're more than physical. So we're more than the material, these versions of ourselves, and we're more than the physical itself, that we're starting to learn more and more about. In our nervous system, that it's made up of energy, of electrical impulses, and this information that flows through us. It flows through our brain in 3 ways. We have a reptilian, the basic, oldest part of our brain that takes care of our basic functions that we don't even think about. There's the mammalian brain, the emotional brain, and we've developed that to have a different kind of intelligence. And then what makes us human and most sophisticated is this neocortex, the ability to judge and to think more creatively. So these have taken generations, so many years to develop. And so physically, we have that evidence in us. We are walking examples that we're always developing. Emotionally, there's a whole field of study about how people develop, and even there's moral stages of development. So we think about things and respond to things and take responsibility for things differently as children, as adolescents, as adults. Spiritually, now there's a beautiful statement that someone made, a monk, I forget his name, in the documentary called One. And these people go out to search high and low, the average person and theologians and philosophers to find out who they think God is and what's the purpose of life and spirituality. And this monk says at the end, first we discover there's another. Then we try to become the other. Then we realize there is no other. And just as we develop physically, just as we develop intellectually, emotionally, we develop spiritually in our consciousness. And so even though we may feel like we have no hope, we have no sense that there's purpose beyond our current experience, we can certainly know more. And so I'm pointing out that there is more. We may feel distorted, we may not be sure who we really are. And this is an important first stage, and a foundational question that will help us to rebuild and transform. Now, this development happens at an individual level, it happens in groups in society as well. So as the civilization, we've evolved from different ways of being organized, to different ways of thinking of government, to think of ways of thinking of God. Just as children have started with kind of a magical thinking, that kids have magical powers and so on. It's great to have this imagination to really believe it, and then to discover that maybe they don't have magical power, but someone else has more power, an adult. And so we shift from magical to mythical kind of thinking. And we can think of religion having developed to try to make sense of this incredible life experience. At first, maybe thinking of magic. Religion is magic, and then religion as myth, and archetypes and superheroes, and we as a people have developed as well. So now we're thinking more democratically. We're thinking in terms of religion and spirituality, how individuals are finding meaning and defining for themselves what is meaningful, what is spiritual. As groups and civilizations, we have recent examples of the Arab Spring and even this Occupy Wall Street movement, where we're constantly questioning, is this the best we can do? Is this the way to be happy and to be whole? And these groups are evolving now, new ways of governing, new ways of rebuilding our economic system, perhaps. It's all early, but it's clear that nothing is just the way it is. So what's all this got to do with us? Because of our past trauma or abuse, various kinds of abuse, that has built over years to impact us, it's damaged us, often in deep ways, and sometimes physically, oftentimes emotionally, intellectually, the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about others, the way we interpret, and spiritually, certainly. So this is a deep impact. We perhaps have been treated as objects, and we may have internalized then that we continue to treat ourselves as objects or others. We may have deep reactions. There's an expression, the issue is in the tissue. Our issues are in the tissues. So without knowing it in that DK world that is so much of us, we react without being conscious of it to other people, to other situations. There may be triggers, there may be just the ways that we go around interpreting things that keep us from being our best self, that maybe keep us in earlier versions of ourselves that are very harmful. So we need to pay attention to that. So what all this has to do with us is that we need to begin taking care of ourselves physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. And so part of this course is to know that you're not alone. It's an important starting point to recognize that these different things that have happened and that have impacted you in such difficult ways, powerful ways, are not your fault, and are not something even necessarily personal. There's something that it wasn't something you necessarily did or deserved or attracted. And so as we start to take care of ourselves, we start to learn that there's much more available for us. So we need to find support with others, whether that's in a therapy setting. That's an important resource, whether it's in a self-help kind of support group with other people who will listen, who can appreciate your experience, that will help us to expand what we know and believe about ourselves to be able to see more. I know that when I was really suffering from the impact of child sexual abuse as an adult, as a professor, it became really important to me what I had and what I did. And so I identified so much with my position, and my possessions, my title. And an important part of my learning, and I suggest in all of ours, is to realize that we're so much more than those things, than what we do and who we are, who we think we are, and how other people have treated us. And so this program is about a shift in the way we think of our experiences, the way we think of ourselves. I'd like to share a bit of the poem that Nelson Mandela read, is written by Marianne Williamson, about who we are. And it's my response to that question, that foundational question, who are you? It says, you are a child of God. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine, as children do. We're born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, but it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So I welcome you to this program, to engage with others in the chat room, to work through the workbook exercises, and to work with me as we continue in this healing process.